पानी पे बात करनी थी because everyone's talking about water and it's becoming a bit of a joke. Everyone seems to want to build a dam. Everyone thinks Pakistan is going dry and we're going to run out of drinking water and So I thought it would be fun to talk about water or the simplicity and complexity of it, because I'm a lawyer and I've spent a few years trying to understand water law. And what I find absolutely fascinating about it and what I want to share with you is how, just like the substance, so किसी भी चीज़ में डालो, it will take the shape of the object you're pouring it into. So there's no single way of understanding water. पानी एक चीज़ नहीं है, it's many multiple things. Next piece. And so, for instance, this is just an example of how water comes into play in our discussions and how many different aspects it has. We call this scales of water. Water operates at different scales. तो हम में से काफियों ने सुना होगा क्यूसेक के बारे में, या मिलियन एकड़ फीट MAF, या per capita water availability. ये अखबारों में पिछले 2-3 हफ्तों के लिए these are figures that have been passing around and they all mean something, and I just want to put them into context. The per capita water availability, for example, हमें बताया जाता है या पढ़ा जाता है कि जब when Pakistan was came into be, there was something close to 5,000 cubic meters per water per person per year. That's the amount of water resources Pakistan had compared to its population. और अब हमें बताया जाता है कि ये फिगर तकरीबन 1000 के करीब है और 1000 से भी गिरता हुआ जा रहा है. And so one needs to understand what this means. Interestingly, and what I hope to show is that the total amount of water in Pakistan is more or less the same, but हमारी population जो बढ़ी है उसकी वजह से average change हो गई है. So from 5,000 it cropping down to 1,000 isn't because पानी कम हो चुका है, it's because आबादी बढ़ चुकी है. And so a lot of these scales of water, when we read about them, I sort of am reminded by that. I think it's Mark Twain who said that there are lies, there are damned lies, and then there are statistics. तो हर इस फिगर को देखना पड़ता है कि what is the context of this figure, what does it mean, इसके पीछे शायद सियासत क्या हो, and then understand the water crisis. We hear of dead levels in energy. ये डैम के बारे में बताया जाता है. डैम का जो लेवल होता है, when it can't flow over the spillway and produce electricity, it's called the dead level. There is still water underneath it. उसके पीछे पानी तो है, बस वो ऊपर से नहीं गुजर सकता. So when we read in the newspapers के तरबेला dead level के करीब है, it's not कि पानी ख़त्म हो गया, it's because it just means कि वो पानी बिजली के लिए नहीं है, but we still have water. We hear about ecological flows as well, and this is very important because we don't consider, oftentimes we don't consider when we're reading the newspapers, that rivers are actually full of life. इसमें एक पूरी ecology होती है from the top to the bottom. A river is not just a particular part of water. If you think about it, a river is a living organism from its source all the way to the basin, and it's all interconnected. It's an environmental flow that some people appreciate and other people don't. Other people prefer the million acre feet reference to water rather than the ecological flow. But also science से हट के, ये सारी hydrological terms हैं, environmental terms हैं, science से हट के water is also very much part of our history and our politics. The water problems that we're dealing now with, say, Punjab and Sindh, predate anything from the 80s and 90s. Actually, ये Sindh-Punjab water accord जो है 1945 का, this was a dispute between colonial Punjab and colonial Sindh that started as early as the 1920s. 1945 में आके मुआहदा हुआ between the two states about how they would share water, and this is very much part of our history, as is the Indus Treaty of 1960 जिसके बारे में काफ़ी दफ़ा पढ़ा जाता है. The interesting thing, one of the many interesting things about the Indus Treaty, and I hope to speak about it more, is that it was signed at a time when Pakistan was under what was called one unit control. There was East Pakistan and there was West Pakistan. There were no provinces at the time. So West Pakistan signed this agreement with India, with no inter or coordinated representation from the provinces. So one of the sort of interesting contradictions of the Indus Treaty is that it is against the provisions of the Sindh-Punjab Water Accord of 1945, because it's an agreement between one block rather than an understanding between Punjab and Sindh as well. तो ये भी हमारी history का एक हिस्सा है, and it becomes part of our politics as well. We have the Indus Apportionment Accord from 1990, which is a remarkable example of the 4 provinces of Pakistan coming together to agree to share the waters of the Indus Basin. It's one of the rare examples of the Federation of Pakistan cooperating on something as important as water. And we don't consider this enough as well. And of course we have literary references of water. Water is where so much of our Punjabi poetry is based. You know, verses of the Mahabharata were first sung on the banks of the Ravi. This is all part of our culture as well. And the important thing to remember about the scales of water is ये सारे scales एक जैसे हैं. Hydrological scale is not more important than the literary scale of water. It's just that हमारे पानी के बारे में जो बात करने वाले लोग हैं, they're largely male, senior men who are hydrologists or engineers or diplomats, and they don't speak of the other scales of water. इसको हम कहते हैं hegemony of scales. एक hydrological hegemony पैदा होगी है पाकिस्तान के अंदर, जहाँ हम सिर्फ पानी के बारे में जब बात करते हैं, हम कालाबाग डैम के बारे में बात करते हैं, हम क्यूसेक्स के बारे में बात करते हैं, हम इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी के बारे में बात करते हैं, but we don't talk about the many other things that water is. और मेरी आज कोशिश ये होगी to show you some of the other things that water is, so you can appreciate where the water crisis comes from. You know, there is a water crisis, but we need to understand it in a better way. Next slide, please. And so, with a bunch of pictures, let's walk through the different types of water. That's a glacier. It's way up north. I think this is north of the Pasu Glacier, and this is the type of water. This type of water in the Karakoram Himalayas and the Hindu Kush mountain range, there's enough ice here to provide drinking water for the people of China, India and Pakistan. That's well over 2 billion people on the face of the earth. This is one of the most important water resources this earth has, and I'll explain that in a second as well. And it's no joke that the northern areas of Pakistan and the glaciers they have are called the third pole, the water pole of the world. And you can imagine that the competing populations of China, India and Pakistan are thirsty for this water, not just for their people but also for their agriculture. So this is a very important form of water. This is a picture I took in the Hunza Valley, and you can see the Karakoram Glacier. Karakoram means young mountain. Apparently mountains can be young, but it means young mountain, and that quite literally you see streams trickling down from the ice caps and flowing into the Hunza River, and the Hunza River later on flows into the river Ravi. This here is another type of water, rainwater. The interesting thing about this is that the minute water hits the ground, it becomes the property of the person who owns the land that it's sitting on. तो इट्स वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग, इस मलकियत इसकी बदल जाती है. और जो सब सोयल वाटर है, जो ज़मीन के नीचे पानी है, इसमें हमारा एक पुराना अंग्रेज़ों का कानून है. इट सेज कि whoever owns the land owns whatever aquifer or stationary water there may be underneath it. And this is a very powerful concept. It's an English legal concept brought into India in the 1880s. 1882 का Easements Act, it's an old esoteric property law of Pakistan. और उसमें लिखा है कि whoever owns land owns the water that you can find underneath it. तो किसी की ज़मीन के नीचे चश्मा निकल आया तो वो पानी जो है उसकी मलकियत है. And as you know that Lahore में, for example, most of the drinking water, actually all of the drinking water in Lahore comes from a tube well. It's brought up from underground. There are 10 million people in Lahore who drink water every single day. This law says that that water is owned only by people rich enough to own land. That's a bit of a problem. It's a 100-year-old law, but chale, when you start looking at these sort of legal problems with law, ये चीज़ें सामने नज़र आनी शुरू हो जाती हैं. Next slide, please. So this is the Indus after the Hunza meets up with it, and many other rivers. There are actually 26 tributaries to the river Indus. We sometimes think that there are only another 4, but there are actually 26 tributaries of this mighty river Indus, from which, as you know, this part of the world even gets its name. Daryai Hind, actually, the old Hindustan, the name Hindustan comes from the river Indus, which means mouth of lion in old Sanskrit. Next slide, please. And as you come further down the river Indus, you'll meet the first man-made sort of infrastructure on it, the Tarbela Dam that was completed in 1976. Most of Tarbela Dam, you can just see this. This is where the spillway where the water comes over the dam and produces electricity. But most of this dam is underwater. There's a huge cement sheet that passes through the entire catchment area to prevent leakage from going into the ground and destabilizing the dam. This is quite a remarkable use of water. This is a natural resource that's being harnessed here. इस डैम का फ़ायदा ये है कि यहाँ पानी रुकता है और ये पानी सेव होता है. It's not just flowing down, it's saved now. इस डैम का फ़ायदा ये था कि ये जो पानी है could be used throughout the year for irrigation. So lands that were previously dependent only on rainfall could now, through the use of irrigation canals, benefit from water throughout the year. उसका फ़ायदा ये हुआ कि जो farmer है, he doesn't plant just one crop a year, he could plant two, as many as 3 crops a year, doubling and in many cases tripling his income. So water like this has had a vast impact on Pakistani economy and the Pakistani people in terms of agriculture, sort of output and agricultural economy. और इस डैम से जो बिजली बनती है, इससे और मंगला डैम से और दूसरे डैम से, ये 1960s and 70s में डैम्स बने थे. And Pakistan's sort of energy capacity rose from about 150 megawatts. West Pakistan had about 150 megawatts at the time of partition to about 23,000 megawatts we have today. And that's a very rapid increase in electricity in a very short period of time. और उसका फ़ायदा ये था कि अब ये जो हर साल 2 या 3 क्रॉप्स निकल रही हैं, it's not just food, it's now cash crops. और अब उस कैश क्रॉप को इस बिजली के साथ इंडस्ट्री के अंदर प्रोसेस करके, वैल्यू ऐड करके आप एक एक्सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं. और इस पानी की वजह से our economy shifted from the time of partition, when most Pakistanis were rural and agricultural and we had a rural and agricultural economy in society, to today, जहाँ तकरीबन आधा पाकिस्तान जो है वो शहरों में रहता है. हमारी क्या कहते हैं सर्विसेज इकॉनमी है, फिर उसके बाद मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर आता है, इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर आता है, और एग्रीकल्चर इकॉनमी तो छोटी सी रह गई है. So it's water like this that's transformed the Pakistani economy. You know, you wonder how quickly that happened and whether society had the ability to take it along in its stride. Next slide, please. Coming further down the river Indus, this lifeblood of our culture, this is the Jinnah barrage. This is another type of water infrastructure you can build on a canal. barrage जो है पानी को रोकता नहीं है, जैसे अभी हमने तरबेला में देखा था, वो सारा पानी रुका हुआ था. Actually, can we go back to that for just a second? I want you to reflect on this for just a moment कि ये जो पीछे catchment area है, I believe Mirpur, the city of Mirpur was in this catchment area and became sunk as a result of the construction and operation of this dam. Do you know that nearly 90,000 people had to be relocated for the construction of this dam? 90,000 people from Kashmir gave up their land and their livelihoods so this project could be built for Pakistan. And that the compensation for many of their claims, their acquisition claims, are still pending today. So you wonder about the incredible social cost a dam like this has and the incredible economic benefit it's given society, and you try and weigh something like that. It's a very terrible calculus. But I would think that, you know, it should make us appreciate कि हम बिजली जो है उसको ज़ाया नहीं करना चाहिए, because there are people who gave up their homes and their livelihoods so that we could enjoy parts of this electricity. Next slide, please. So this is the Jinnah barrage. This is another type of storage infrastructure you can build on the river. It's on the river Indus. इसका मकसद पानी को रोकना नहीं है. This allows you to stop water and divert it into a canal. Next slide. Let's have a look at a canal. This is the Brb Link Canal. It's on the way to Amritsar on the GT road. You'll cross it, the Brb Link Canal, and it carries water from the river Chenab south, directly south, underneath the river Ravi and down into the river Jhelum, also providing a moat for defense for the city of Lahore. This was actually built after partition, because shortly after partition, I don't know if I have a slide to show this, but shortly after partition, you have to understand, a part of the English irrigation network that existed in Punjab before partition, a part of it belonged in India now. And shortly after partition, after about 6 months, there was a transition agreement between India and Pakistan. When that transition period ran out, the Indian government of Punjab turned off the water that flowed into Pakistan through those irrigation channels. It was the 1st of April 1948, say April's Fool's Days of sorts. And it was the dispute that arose as a result of India exercising this control that eventually became the Indus Water Treaty, the agreement between the two countries on how to share the water of the Indus Basin. But shortly after India turned the taps off in Madhupur, Pakistan responded by constructing the Brb Link Canal, which would be an alternative source of water to this part of Punjab. So if India ever tried to do this again, it wouldn't be successful in doing so, because there'd be an alternate flow of water. My father was in school when this canal was being built in the 1950s, and he remembers that his class in St. Anthony's used to be bussed over so that kids could participate in the construction of this canal, because it was a symbol of Pakistan's independence and growing up and no longer being dependent on India and being secure. And so water infrastructure like this, for instance, in my father's mind was very much stuck in the development of Pakistan and providing security for Pakistan. Two themes you will consistently see repeating themselves when we talk about water: development in Pakistan and security in Pakistan. And I think it might have to do with the BRB canal. Just on the left of this photograph, there's a little mausoleum for the soldiers who perished here defending Lahore in 1965. This was where the Indian infantry could come no further, because canals like or bridges like this are blown up when the enemy comes close. Next slide, please. But that's a lined canal. This is what you see more often in the Punjab, an unlined canal that brings water from the rivers, from a barrage, through a irrigation channel into fields like this. These are unlined canals, which means there's nothing underneath, no cement underneath this. And this has had a very interesting impact on the sort of underground water system in the Punjab. It's a very interesting way of setting out a map of the 5 rivers of the Punjab. You've got the Indus, the Jhelum, the Chenab, the Ravi, Beas and the Sutlej, all here. And a diagram that shows groundwater levels as you go from the Jhelum to the Sutlej over here. Groundwater levels naturally in South Asia or pre-irrigation were here, fairly low. But with the development of irrigation infrastructure by the colonials through the late 1800s and early 20th century, many of these unlined canals, koi cement nahi tha, niche pani beh jata tha. The unlined canals meant that the water levels started rising, especially where there were canals. So we saw that with human irrigation, groundwater levels have risen, and subsequently with the Indus Water Treaty in 1960 and other irrigation replacement canals coming in, you can see the water levels coming almost to the surface. This was because of agriculture, human agriculture, man agriculture, canals and things like that, that the water level rose. And it was in a response to many of these waterlogged areas. Niche bilkul underneath the surface of the land, there was now water and the land was no longer productive. So this high groundwater resulted in many tube well schemes being introduced in Pakistan. Tube well schemes were considered a means of reclaiming land and also getting free water. So as long as you had the electricity, you were doing not just a good thing, but you were getting water for your crops. Next slide. So from the canals, you get into a tertiary and system of canals. These are called distribution channels, which take the water from these lined or unlined canals downstream, and through little 12-inch round holes called moghas, this water is discharged into beautiful fields that we envision like this, that provide the lifeblood of our food, most of our employment. And this then, next slide, is a picture that displays that through this irrigation network in Punjab, through this system of canals, the water of the rivers of Punjab is diverted, and all of this in blue is land that is under canal command, which is all land that is now subject to agriculture. So it's quite remarkable that in the last 150 odd years, we have been able to literally harness the benefit, the potential of the Indus Basin through this canal irrigation network. And it's truly transformed everything in South Asia. Some people suggest that the canal irrigation network is a more profound thing to have happened in South Asia than even partition. But maybe I'm just making that up. I have friends here who would debate that. Next slide, please. All right, now that's sort of a background as to how varied and complex water can be, and how it works its way through the system, and how it transforms itself, and how it touches people at each one of these scales. I just wanted to talk a little bit about some features about water, some short of science stuff that you know, to make a point about understanding the politics at play at water. This is the hydrological cycle. You all remember it from class. It's how water flows through the system. From clouds, ice, it goes into the ground, it settles in lakes, into rivers, it evaporates. It eventually, through surface flows and also groundwater outflow, goes into the oceans where it gets evaporated and becomes cloud. It's a cycle. Water does not escape this cycle. It will remain in this cycle. It will be in the sky, it will be on the surface, or it will be underground. It will be solid, it will be liquid, or it will be gas. That's it. Next slide. And we know that most of the water on Earth is found in our oceans, and a very little bit of it is clean and it's in the ice, and surface water accounts for a very small, minuscule part of it. But this is also slightly misleading, because in the next slide, you'll see that if you take all of the surface water on Earth and bundle it together, that's about all the water we have on this planet. The surface of the Earth, in fact, is very, very thin. It's a very, very shallow film of water that covers the surface of the Earth. There's not a huge volume of it. And again, this is a cycle. That's all the water there is on Earth, and has been on Earth since it coalesced. It will either remain in the sky, on the ground, or underground. It will either be ice, it will be water, or it will be gas. Next slide. And we can break this down into all the water, all the fresh water, and all the lakes and rivers. I don't mean to scare you here, but I just mean to point out that this is what we call a limited resource. And if you can sort of understand what this means, the next couple of questions really help you understand about water. When you see this, you have to ask yourself, where is the water? And who controls the water? Because that's all there is. Next slide. Now I want to move down into South Asia and talk a little bit about water in Pakistan, जो हम irrigation के बारे में बात करते हैं. This is a map of northwest India before partition, and it shows the plains of the Punjab and the 5 or 6, actually the many rivers, कितने दरिया थे between them, and the various doabs, the Bari doab, the Rachna. The Bari is called because it's between the Beas and the Ravi. Beas ka Be or Ravi ka Vi, so you get the Bari. And between the river Ravi and Chenab, you have the Rachna, which is a breakup of the two names. And between the Chenab and the Jhelum, it's called the Chhaj Doab. These are the first couple of letters of the Persian word for each one of these rivers. These doabs, until modernity, were more or less islands of their own. Most of the settlements in Punjab lined across the waterbeds. They weren't actually in the dry, arid doab areas. And people in different doabs spoke different dialects, had different cultures. Bilkul mukhtalif tha. And so it's very difficult to take something as complicated and beautiful and historical as this, as my friend Danish Mustafa says, and translate it into something that's as simple as this. What I want to underline is water is very complex. It contains history and multitudes. But when we see graphs like this, it only shows you one dimension of water. Although it's only one dimension of water, I do want to use both of these charts to illustrate a couple of points. This is the river system of Pakistan. It shows the Indus River as a sort of source flowing all the way to the sea, the Jhelum, the Chenab, the Ravi and the Sutlej. And it tells you the amount of time in hours it takes water to travel from here to there. It takes 24 hours. From Skardu to the Parnab bridge, it takes 2 days for the water to flow. So you can see this is a system of how all the water flows down. It takes about 70 days for water to flow the entire length of the Indus. And it takes about 35 days for it to travel this way. You can sort of calculate it up. At the time of partition, this also shows you the various storages. This is where on each of the rivers there's a dam. So as the water comes flowing down, as it melts from the rivers, as the monsoon falls, this water flows down from the hills and is caught by the first storage dam. और वहाँ पानी रहता है, and it can be used for the rest of the year. And it's discharged then all the way down through the system. And it was this vast, complicated irrigation system that the British maintained in North India, which really helped them harness the economy, the potential of the land here. मगर जब the time of partition उन्होंने किसी अंग्रेज वकील को पेंसिल दे दी and he put a line like this through it. Partition didn't consider the irrigation system, and that's one of the reasons why we had the Indus Water Treaty. It's kind of like the other side of the coin of partition. You know, you partitioned the land in 1947 and you actually wound up partitioning the waters in 1960. It's So I just want to explain what happened in that partition with this chart over here. This is again the river systems, the river Indus, the river Jhelum, the river Chenab, the river Ravi, and the river Sutlej. These two rivers under the Indus Water Treaty were allocated to India, which is this division, this border here. So inka pani jo hai, over the last couple of decades, has stopped flowing into Pakistan. This water over here accounted for about 30% of the overall water in the system, about 30%. And so, in order to make up the loss of this 30% of water flowing in these two rivers, a network of replacement canals was built, so that waters from the Indus and waters from the Jhelum could be brought to the rivers Ravi and the river Sutlej, and these irrigation networks could be maintained. So the Indus Treaty was many things. It was not just the division of the waters, but also these replacement irrigation works and the construction of the Tarbela Dam here and the Mangla Dam over here as storages. So it was this very complicated way of harnessing the potential of the basin so that Pakistan would have, again, the same amount of water through its system flowing downwards through these irrigation networks all of Pakistan. What really concerns the Sindhis is the fact that this replacement canal was built. This is taking water from the Indus and putting it into the Jhelum, and from here into the Ravi and into the Jhelum, from the Chenab. So it diverts water from the Indus into the rest of Punjab. People of Sindh don't like that because the Sindh-Punjab water accord of 1945 disallows Punjab from doing that, interestingly enough. But through the Indus Water Treaty, this replacement canal is really what gets them going. This replacement canal doesn't, because it will flow water back down into Sindh. But this replacement canal allows water from the Indus to be diverted into Punjab's rivers. So that's the gripe that they have, कि ये आपने क्या किया हमारे पूछे बताए बगैर.
What is it called?
I'm sorry?
What is it called? The first canal? The replacement canal?
Name of the canal.
Name of the canal.
It's either the Jinnah Link Canal. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the Jinnah Link Canal. Next slide. This is another slide about water that I just wanted to talk about. अभी तो हमने दरियाओं के पानी के बारे में बात कर लिया है, canal के बारे में बात कर लिया है. Another form of water that comes to Pakistan, बारिश की वजह से, that comes through rain. And so this is a picture here. It's a composite of where rain falls in Punjab. And you'll note that it falls here and it becomes arid in the north and arid in the south. This is the mountain range. The monsoon sort of weather pattern comes and it collides against these mountain ranges and it doesn't go any further and it peters out over here. So this is where the water falls. It's in North Punjab, in KP, and in the sort of hilly mountainous areas. This is where the water falls. It comes through the system into streams, into rivulets, and it can be caught by various storages that we've constructed. What's interesting is that I've heard, this is from the Director General of the Met Department, that one of the things that climate change means is that the reliability and pattern of the monsoon is changing. So not only is it less intense and less reliable, but it's also beginning to flow a little bit southwards. So it's no longer going all the way north, it's flowing on average through the plains of Punjab. And what that means is, जब बारिश पड़ती है, it's missing where the reservoirs are built. Dams तो यहाँ पड़े हुए हैं. So if you build dams further up over here without considering climate change, और बारिश इधर आना शुरू हो जाए, these dams won't be helpful at all. Next slide please. एक और किस्म का पानी है. This is the water underground. This is also something we don't consider. Since ये ये large scale irrigation की वजह से groundwater tables बढ़े हैं, there has been a very keen support on tube well irrigation through the 20th century. इसके सियासी भी मकसद हैं. Farmers are given free water, you could think, as long as they can set up a tube well. And it's not surprising that farmers on both sides of the border, in India and in Pakistan, being a very large block of voters, get a subsidized tube well tariff. उनको बिजली बहुत सस्ती मिलती है. So they can literally suck water out of the ground for next to nothing. And what that is doing is it's putting pressure back on the aquifer. The aquifer that had grown back up is now falling back down again because of this increased use of tube wells in the last 40 or 50 years. Next slide. This is a fantastic image. If you can play go to the main, press play. This is the NASA GRACE satellite imagery of about 10 years of groundwater use in North India. It's one of the most heavily mined areas. और आपको पता चल रहा है कि because of groundwater use of tube well extraction, there is a change in the flows of water in the North Indian aquifer. This is no reason to be alarmed. I mean, there is reason to be alarmed because it's unsustainable use. But what this does show is a need for coordinated groundwater extraction between India and Pakistan. वो हमारे पास इस वक्त है नहीं. जो हम इंडस वाटर ट्रीटी के बारे में बात करते हैं वो सिर्फ दरियाओं की हद तक का है. It doesn't talk about the groundwater. Mostly because back in 1960 there was no technology to understand how groundwater flows. So we didn't have the NASA GRACE satellite. So this is also stuff to think about in the future. Next slide. So now having talked about where water is in the sky, on the ground and underwater and some of the pressures that we're facing, ये पाकिस्तान के हवाले से let's ask ourselves who is responsible for water. मैंने पहले तो अर्ज कर लिया ना कि we've got this old English law that says whoever owns land वो पानी भी उसके नीचे उसकी मलकियत है. So think of that for a second. I'll just race through who does what in Pakistan. And what's very important to note is that because water has different scales, no one entity in the government of Pakistan is responsible for it. So different aspects of water are governed by very, very differing agencies. उनकी ज़िम्मेदारियाँ मुख्तलिफ होती हैं, उनके responses मुख्तलिफ होते हैं. So at the federal level, जो वफाकी level पे इस्लामाबाद के अंदर है, most importantly we have something called the Council of Common Interests. This is a body that comprises the Chief Ministers of Pakistan and the Prime Minister of Pakistan and a few other senior members of cabinet. And one of their responsibilities is to adjudicate water disputes between the provinces. There have been water disputes between the provinces. KP has for many years been requesting WAPDA for its share of hydropower benefits. Sindh and Punjab have been arguing about how surface water should be shared amongst them. And the Council of Common Interests is the authority that then resolved this issue through the Indus Apportionment Accord of 1990. It set up the Indus River System Authority, which is IRSA, which is the body that divides the river waters of Pakistan. There's also a federal flood commission that was set up in the 1970s because of devastating floods in 1971 and 1977, when we realized that the provinces alone couldn't coordinate floods themselves. So the flood commission has been there. And this actually raises the question that if the flood commission was constituted after two horrific floods in Pakistan, where was it in 2010? You know, it really is, it's one of those questions you ask. And also at the Islamabad level is the Indus Water Treaty. The Pakistan Commissioner of Indus Waters, he deals with his counterpart in Delhi. तो ये वफाकी सरकार की sort of जिम्मेदारियां हैं. You can't ask Islamabad for clean drinking water. पीने का पानी उनकी जिम्मेदारी नहीं है. For instance, this is what they do, and it's a very limited set of responsibilities, and we shouldn't conflate these with others. At the provincial level, we've got the Irrigation and Drainage Department, which is responsible for managing the canals. The Irrigation and Drainage Department is one of the great departments of the government of Punjab. Pre-partition tak aap pahunch jaye. Jab Angrez yahan pahunche the, they didn't wow the locals with buildings because you couldn't compete with the Mughals. What the colonial wowed the natives with was infrastructure. So the colonial built train lines and railroads and built irrigation canals. And so the two big departments that grew out of the experience in Punjab was the Railways Department and of course the Communication and Works Department, which was setting out telegraphs and also setting out canals. But जब communication and works की जिम्मेदारी irrigation में बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ गई, an irrigation department was also formed. It was one of the few first departments of the old English government in Punjab in the late 1800s, and it traces itself back to there. And their control is vast. Wherever there's a rural area, irrigation and drainage department में कहीं ना कहीं जिम्मेदारी पहुंचती है. We also have the Housing, Urban Development and Public Health Engineering Department, or HUD sometimes. And this mans and is responsible for the drinking water we have in urban areas. शहरों के बड़े शहरों के अंदर जहाँ वासा है वहाँ जिम्मेदारी हाउसिंग अर्बन डेवलपमेंट की है, बिकॉज इट इज़ द पेरेंट डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ द वाटर एंड सैनिटेशन एजेंसी. सो लाहौर का वासा है, सो ऑल ऑफ द पीने का पानी इन सिविलियन लाहौर इज़ द रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ लाहौर वासा, एंड इट्स ब्रॉट टू यू courtesy the Housing Urban Development Department of the government of Punjab. We also, and we shouldn't forget this, have a third tier of government, local government, and they are by law responsible for drinking water in rural areas and also drinking water in smaller, you could say, secondary cities. this is deliberately vague. I mean, not deliberately vague, it's or you could say deliberately tough to understand, because जो institutional structure हमारा पानी का है पाकिस्तान के अंदर, it's not clear. It's not very clear and it's not very strong. We don't have very strong laws when it comes to managing drinking water in rural areas. क्यों? Because मैं मालिक हूँ ज़मीन का, इसके नीचे जो पानी है वो मेरा है, यूनियन काउंसिल का चेयरमैन कौन है मुझसे पूछने वाला? And this happens quite often. And it doesn't have to be a big sort of ठेकेदार, it can be a bottled water company that sets up operations in a rural area. As long as they own the land and they can pay for the electricity, they can suck up the water. And do you think there's a local government strong enough to stand up against a multinational water company? I don't think so. Next slide. So, considering that, you know, there isn't much institutional alignment, or yahi se phir, because there's a lack of institutional alignment, a lot of things get askew. We're told a lot about water conservation. We see slides like this, you know, you can reduce water by doing these sorts of things. और बात बिल्कुल दुरुस्त है. I'm not going to dispute any of this, and all of us should be conscious of doing so. But when you have to ask yourself, first of all, मैं पानी कौन सा बचा रहा हूँ या बचा रही हूँ? What am I saving? Am I saving the water in Lahore? What's the water? There's no point doing this in parts of Pakistan where there's plenty of water. You can go to the northern areas, there's so much water there, you don't have nothing to worry about. You know, वहाँ चश्मे निकले हैं, there's water flowing from glaciers, there's no issue about doing this. But it's in places where there's a water shortage that we should be concerned about how we use water. And Lahore is in many ways unique, because we can still get clean water, or relatively clean water, in our taps 24 hours a day for vast areas of Lahore. There are some areas of Lahore where this is not true, but name me another city in a developing country where you have the facilities that you have today with respect to tap water. It's unheard of in other cities to be able to reach to a tap in your kitchen and get flowing water throughout the day. So we have to be very, very careful. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is what we call personal consumption. You know, we do for domestic purposes. I just want to illustrate another way you can look at water, called virtual water. The amount of water it takes to produce something. Take, for example, beef. To make a kilo of beef, it takes 15,000 liters of water. Because you've got to grow the animal for months and years so that it's large enough to be slaughtered, to be eaten by us. You have to feed it water, and you have to feed it something that was most likely produced in a field that consumed water. So as a result, if you look at the water footprint of making beef, it's actually quite vast. I think you could put more than, you could fill up this entire room with 15,000 liters of water and have plenty to spare. That's just 1 kilo of water. So if we change our eating habits, as opposed to just making sure we turn the tap off when we brush our teeth, we might save, you know, 15 gallons of water that way. But changing your eating habits, for example, could have a multiplier effect on water footprints. Take here, for example, cotton. Now, cotton takes between 8 to 10,000 liters of water to make a pair of jeans, for example, a unit of cotton. So you have to ask yourself, in a water scarce country where this water is being used to make clothes that we dispose of every single year, maybe we could conserve water by changing our fashion practices and not just our sort of the way we brush our teeth. Now what's very sad is that coffee and chocolates are very high at the list, by the way. It's very depressing, but it's there. And oddly enough, beer and potatoes is at the bottom of the list. I don't know what that means. Next slide, please. But if you get your head around the idea of virtual water, the idea you can convert the amount of water it takes to produce something, to understand that, here's an interesting chart of how countries export water. Pakistan produces a lot of sugar and a lot of cotton and a lot of rice, all of which are water intensive crops. And it processes those cotton shirts and exports them abroad. It takes that rice and exports it to countries like Iran and elsewhere. And so as a result, Pakistan is a net water exporter. If you think of rice, it's nothing but finely packaged water. It takes about 2,200 liters of water to produce a kilo of rice. And this is very interesting in global economy, because it shows where water is going. It's going to where consumption is. This is where people are having coffee, where they're buying their this is where the consumerist capital of the world, the West, is a net water importer. And so we have to ask ourselves, in a larger global framework, what is equitable here? because it's difficult. There are people who don't have enough water to produce food crops in Africa. Should we just give up giving them food aid because हमारा पानी वहाँ जा रहा है? But at the same time, we should be careful that other countries don't come to Pakistan to use its water for its food, which is one of the allegations made of CPEC, that they're not after land in Pakistan, they're interested in the water underneath it. So that because there's water shortages in China as well. So virtual water raises all sorts of very interesting and maybe unanswered questions about how the world works. And it's another very interesting way of looking at water. Next slide, please. I haven't spoken about water quality, which is another very important thing. So far I've just been talking about water as a sort of resource, water in rivers, water used for agriculture, water used to make shirts, beer. But this is now a few slides on the health impacts of water, because water is something also that we consume. And impure water causes a vast array of various diseases and health issues. This was a map of 2010. It's a World Bank map of Pakistan lit up at night, and it's used to show where the urban intensity in Pakistan is. So it gives you an idea where everyone's living in Pakistan, where the population is most concentrated. This map on the right was published last year in September by American Scientific after I think a 3-year study of almost all the water sources in Pakistan. And the red indicates the intensity of arsenic poisoning that's available, more or less the same belt you'll see where all the population of Lahore, of Pakistan, is also situated. So the American Scientific report indicated that there was something close to, I think, 60 million Pakistanis at risk of arsenic poisoning, which is in the ground and unless treated, very, very dangerous. Arsenic is naturally occurring, by the way. Arsenic is naturally occurring, especially in areas where there has been human irrigation, where people have altered the water levels. So you'll find high levels of arsenic in North India, you'll find high levels of arsenic in parts of China where they've been doing agriculture. But the thing with, and it means many things, but the thing about arsenic is that it's treatable. When you put a filter through the water, put the water through a filter, you can treat arsenic. It's not necessarily a sort of death sentence for us, but it is a risk for people. So unless this water is properly addressed, it could have serious health consequences on people. And this is pictures of what arsenic poisoning looks like. It winds up in your rashes, it affects your organs. Next slide.
It is on kale?
Yes, it does. Next slide, please. That child did not survive. So other than arsenic, which is naturally occurring because we are tampering with the water levels with things like tube wells and unlined canals, we are also polluting water by allowing untreated industrial effluent to be discharged into it. We have to remember that only 50-60 years ago, industry was the exception in our part of North India. Shehar kam the, industry kam thi. And if you had an industry, you threw some water into the Indus was large enough to absorb that pollution. But as our population has grown to nearly over 200 million, that industrial effluent intensity is magnified. And a lot of this water is being thrown into riverbeds and being used for irrigation, untreated, absolutely untreated. So isme jo bhi chemicals hain will leach through the unlined canals and go into the water table and are finding their way in parts of Pakistan into the food crops that are being grown. Next slide. And this is a serious health concern. And it's for this reason that I think UNESCO about 10 years ago recorded that nearly half, about 45% of all patients admitted in hospitals in Pakistan were there because of something related to water. They had impure drinking water, mighty polluted drinking water, and maybe not just one glass, something that's grown within them because they've been consuming the same slightly impure water for many weeks or many months. Next slide. Huge health impacts. Next slide. So much so that we've actually got people making art out of it. These are people, oftentimes they work with the Lahore Waste Management Company as sanitary workers. They live on the river Ravi bed, and it's a fantastic series of essays taken by Malcolm Hutchison a few years ago. If you live anywhere near the river Ravi bed, you know that the water of the river Ravi was given to India, and over many years, they have a copy of the book. There it is. It's a very profound piece of work. But anyone who's seen the Ravi now realizes that there's no water that flows through the Ravi. The water of the Ravi was allocated to India, and India has put it to good use, irrigating parts of Haryana and Punjab. The water that you see flowing past in the Ravi is most likely rain that fell in a northern catchment area or the industrial effluent of the city of Lahore. And so if this gentleman is bathing using a hand pump has a range of about 20-30 feet, he's most likely bathing in just industrial effluent. Next slide. That's an immense health cost. And now, coming towards the end of my presentation, one last word on these people. Groundwater, by law, by right, is a natural resource, belongs to all Pakistanis. And our law is very clear. जो natural resource है should be used for the benefit of Pakistan and for Pakistanis, and not for any corporate or commercial interest. This is called the Doctrine of Public Trust. It's part of environmental law, and I'm very familiar with it. It's a very profound sort of legal principle that we have. So if you go north of the river Ravi in the Rachna Doab near Sheikhupura, there's a bottled water factory that's sunk a tube well, and in 2015 sucked up 220 million liters of water from the Rachna aquifer and put it into these indestructible plastic bottles. Indestructible. They will remain with us for thousands of years. So they extract this water for free, they put it in these indestructible polluting water bottles, and then they sell them to us. और हम खुशी से खरीदते हैं 15 rupees plus sales tax. बात यह है कि वो पैसे नहीं देते पानी के लिए, वो सिर्फ बिजली के पैसे और रिवर्स ऑस्मोसिस के पैसे दे रहे हैं. They don't pay for this water, and that's very unfair because this water belongs not to us but perhaps to the people of Sheikhupura. That company made 90 billion rupees after tax in 2015. 90 billion. Most of it was in other products as well. They had juice and stuff like that, but even juices require water. 90 billion. Imagine if just 10% of that was taxed by the local government of Sheikhupura and put into schools and infrastructure. It would be
a great business to start.
But if it wasn't the folks over the Nestle people do it in Rachna, it would be the next bunch of people, the Pepsi people. If it won't be them, it will be the Coca-Cola people, or it will be the Falani bakery water or gourmet water, or any number of people.
Askari water.
So, Askari water. I wonder what you get in DH actually. It's probably Askari water. So there's very little good about this plastic water. We don't know what happens to the water when it remains in these plastic vessels and we consume it later. It's very unregulated. Nestle Pure Life was actually launched in Pakistan. Because our groundwater laws are so weak, you own the land, you own the water, they actually started the product from here to see whether it would work elsewhere. And you can watch documentaries on Nestle. They, in Michigan, you've heard of Flint, Michigan ke masle for the last 2 years. Wahan peene ka pani nahi hai. Guess what? Nestle has a plant there and pays the government of Flint $200 a year for the water, and sells it for hundreds of thousands of dollars later on in its life. This is deeply inequitable. And I don't want to just name one company, but it's more reflective कि हमारे कानून ठीक नहीं है, that someone can come and take so much advantage. We need to have a very strong counter argument when it especially comes to drinking water. Because, you know, when people talk about pricing water, कि जी यहाँ लाहौर के अंदर we should have a cost for water, there's a lot of threat कि ये privatized ना हो जाए. But in many ways we're already paying a price for water, and vast amounts of it as well. हमें आदत तो पड़ गई है. But just imagine for these last 15 years, अगर हम इन लोगों को 15 रुपए plus sales tax ना दे रहे होते, वही सारे पैसे हम अपने housing and urban development department को लगा लेते, we would have had nice infrastructure in Lahore. The Water and Sanitation Agency, and I'm actually old enough to remember, had a great reputation until exactly 1993. It was a fantastic service provider. People can actually remember this. And in 1993, they changed the tube well tariff on Vasa, made it a scarp tariff, and it broke the legs of it. So this is something that we have to counter, and we don't have a counter argument when it comes to drinking water. We don't have a narrative in our civil society कि पानी की कीमत क्या होनी चाहिए, हम क्या तैयार हैं देने के लिए. हाँ, absolutely right that, you know, शायद 20, 40, 50 लीटर हर इंसान का हक बनता है, उसको मुफ्त पानी मिलना चाहिए. I have no objection against that. But if you have very low costs of water as we have here in Lahore, the incentive is for rich people to abuse it. जहाँ आपने सिर्फ 3,000 रुपये महीना पानी का देना है, तो फिर ठीक है, बड़ा सा गार्डन लगा लो, अपनी गाड़ी को भी पानी दे दो. There's no narrative on saving water, and that's what's very, very harmful, because it allows things like the private sector to take this incredible advantage of our natural resource. So I should be winding up now, and I've talked a lot about water, but I haven't said a thing about the National Water Policy or the Kalabagh Dam. I've mentioned the Indus Water Treaty a couple of times. A lot of people ask me about this, and I'm sure you will too. water is much more complicated than the Kalabagh Dam. The Kalabagh Dam is like the Tarbela. It's a huge storage of water. We can store water elsewhere and in different forms. We don't have to have the Kalabagh. We could change the way our water requirements are just by reducing the amount of meat we eat or the clothes that we wear. There's games to be played on either side of this. So the water complexity is vast and the water crisis is very much there, but it should be appreciated, and I hope all of you enjoyed this, and I'm still here for questions. Thank you very much for your attention.